Hello. Okay, class. We're kind of getting back into it right now. I don't know why this jumped all the way to the bottom over there. Let's go back up to where we should be with exercise 4. This is exactly where we had left off. As you can see right above this, boom, boom, exercise 3 done, boom, exercise 2 done, boom, exercise 1 done. We finished all the way up to exercise number 4 in yesterday's class. And as I said at the end of last class, today's video I would be going over exercise 4, exercise 5, and exercise 6. I would be going over all of them to make sure that we really got a handle of percentages. Now, we were doing quite well the other day, so I certainly hope that we've got this down, but of course we always need that a little bit of extra help. There's nothing wrong with that. So, for exercise 4, it's saying that each relationship below is going to compare a shaded portion to an entire figure. Shaded portion is our part. The entire figure is our whole. Now remember, that means that we're going to be making part to whole ratios. Oh, just like that, a 6 to 100 part to whole ratio. Because we're dealing with 6%. If we're dealing with 6%, then that means that's 6 out of 100, or 6 to 100 as our part to whole. Now, if I wanted to take this, and before I make it into a decimal, I like making it into a fraction first, because fraction I feel is a lot easier to get from percentage than a decimal is. Not that a decimal is really that hard. It's just I like fractions a little bit more. So if I wanted to take 6 and make it to a fraction, well, I'm just going to take my 6 and I'm going to put it on top of my 100. Because 6% is 6 out of 100, or 6 100ths. So my fraction is going to be 6 100ths. Quite simple. Doesn't really take us too long to get that. But now we can use that and we can get our decimal. Remember, if we're going to get our decimal, we can either just use our fraction and calculate that out and get our 0.06. But there's also another way that we can do it. And this also kind of just goes along in with 6 divided by 100. If I were to write out my 6 and I were to put my decimal place where it should be when it comes to my percentage, if I want to take my percentage and change it into a decimal, what I'm going to just do is I'm going to take my decimal point and I'm going to move it 1, 2 spots, and my decimal is going to end up right there. But wait, that doesn't make much sense. I jumped over an invisible number here. Well, that invisible number is actually going to be a 0. So we're going to get that 0.06, and then always I like to put my leading 0 in front, just because I don't like 0.06, because somebody might miss that decimal point if we don't put a 0 in front. So always like it being 0.06 as opposed to just 0.06. It just looks nicer. Now what it wants us to do is draw a model. So that model is going to be like these models that we have up here, or this model we have here, or that model that we did up there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a grid. It's going to have 100 blocks in it. And once again, obviously, if I had to draw each and every block by hand, oh god, that would take forever. Luckily, as we've done up here, we can just do a 10 by 10 grid, which makes it a lot easier for us to draw our model. If I want a 10 by 10 grid, I need 10 up here, and I need 10 along the side. Which means if I want a 10 by 10, I need to draw 9 lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I kind of run out of space over here, so I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to take one of my bigger chunks and I'm going to cut it. And of course, obviously, this isn't to scale. I'm drawing with a mouse right now, so obviously it's not going to be the best drawing, but it's going to be good enough for the purposes. Anybody who looks at this model will understand what it's supposed to mean, especially if I tell them, by the way, this model is not to scale. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns, and now I need to split into 10 rows as well. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then my last line's actually going to fit down here this time, so 9. And by drawing 9 lines, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rows. And obviously a 10 by 10 is going to give me those 100 I need. Now, obviously when I'm shading this in, I'm going to want to swap to a different color. If I keep that same color, then it's just going to look messy. So for this, we have 6 out of 100, or 6 out of 100, or 6%. So that means I'm going to shade in 6 out of the 100 squares that I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And with that, I've shaded in 6 100ths. My model's done, which means that I can now move on to my second line. My second line, instead of 6%, is now going to be 60%. So, with 60%, again, the easiest ones for us to do would probably be our fraction and our ratio. So I'm going to start off with the fraction of 60 over 100. But wait, I can reduce this fraction, can't I? I can also reduce this one if I wanted to. If I wanted to, I can make this one 3 out of 50, but that's not really a fun number to work with. So I'll leave this one as 6 over 100. But there's actually easier fractions that I can deal with other than 60 to 100. And that's going to be something like either 6 over 10 or something like 3 over 5. Both of those are much easier fractions for us to work with, especially when it comes to drawing our model. Now, when it comes to our ratio, we're going to want to keep that same ratio, even though obviously we could reduce it, but we're going to have 60 to 100. We're going to have our ratio be 60 to 100. And again, we can reduce this ratio if we wanted to. We could reduce it to 30 to 50. We could reduce it to 6 to 10. We could reduce it to 3 to 5. There's a bunch of things that we could reduce this to, but we kind of just don't want to. We're going to leave this ratio as it is because we're comparing it to the whole. And our whole, when we're dealing with percentages, is always going to be 100. So I kind of just want to keep all of our ratios to 100. Now, when it comes to our decimal, what I can do is I can either just calculate it using my fraction, or I can use my percentage and move the decimal point over twice, which would give me 0.60, or just 0.6. Now, what I could do when it comes to my model, if I really wanted to, I could draw another 10 by 10 grid, just like what we have here. But in case you forgot, it kind of took us a little while to draw that 10 by 10 grid. So what if we made a different model and we didn't use a 10 by 10 grid for our model? Instead, we used one of the other fractions to draw this model, and maybe perhaps we use our 3/5. So I'm going to draw a model that's going to just be broken into fifths. If it's broken into fifths, that means I need 4 lines. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And with those 4 lines, obviously I'm going to change my color again because I don't want it to be the same color as how I drew my model. And now we already found out the fraction, well, that's 3/5, so my model can be much simpler for this one. It's going to be 1, 2. I wish I had a paint bucket so I could very easily fill these without having to scribble like this. You know what I can do? I can change the thickness of my pen. Boom. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to redraw those lines in blue between them just because they kind of got a little smushed when it came to coloring in my squares. But now we can see that we have 3/5, which we already found out was the same as 60 over 100. So now we've got our model, we found our ratio, our fraction, and our decimal. Now we can go on to the third one. Third one is 600. 600%? What? That makes no sense. I thought we could only have up to 100% because it's out of 100. But we can have more than 100%. It just means that we are going to have more than one whole. So if I were to make this into a ratio, I would have a ratio of 600 to 100. If I were to turn this into a fraction, it would be 600 over 100, or, well, that's quite simply just equal to 6. That means that instead of just having 100%, which is one whole, I instead have 6 wholes. Obviously, when it comes to my decimal is also going to just be 6 with that little decimal at the end, because there's nothing really to do. I could move my decimal over twice to get to 6, or I can just literally look at this, which is 6. But the question then comes, and well, how do I draw a model for that? Well, it's actually quite simple. We're just going to draw 6 completely separate squares. Because as we mentioned, this isn't the same as what we had before, where we have 6 separate parts out of a whole 100. Each one of these squares on their own, as you can see, they're not connected to each other. Each of these is their own whole. I'll turn up the thickness a little bit. So for this, our diagram, we're going to have 6 wholes. Because we have 600 to 100. We have 6 times the amount that one whole is, so it's going to be 6 whole. Let me just write that down. 6 wholes, just so that no one is confused and they say, oh, well, there's 6 there, so that must be 6/6. No, it's 6 wholes. Next we have 32%. 32%. Well, that model's not going to be super easy for us to do now, is it? I think we'll just do 32%, and then we'll do this thing here for 0.55. No, I think we'll do all of them. We'll do all of them because it's important to be able to go from each of these to find everything that's missing. So let's go with 32%. For 32%, well, if I wanted to make this into a fraction, it's, again, pretty simple. I just take that 32, take off that percent sign, and I'm going to put it over 100. If I want to make it into a ratio, well, I'm just going to take that 32, and I'm going to put my colon, and I'm going to put my whole, which is 100. For 32%, I can move my decimal over twice, or I can calculate what 32 divided by 100 is. But moving that decimal gives me 0.32. But again, I like to put that 0 out front, just so that nobody gets confused. So we have 0.32. Now, sadly for this one certainly is looking like I'm going to have to do another 10 by 10 grid. It takes a little bit longer, but you know, I think it's the only way that we have. So I'm going to draw my large square that represents my whole. Kind of left my box a little bit as I was drawing it, but that's fine. And now I'm going to divide this into a 10 by 10. To do that, I need 9 lines. So 1, ooh, this one's going to be a problem. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and lastly 9. So I drew 9 lines, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different columns. Now I'm going to do the same down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, and I ran out of a little bit of room. It's fine though, because I could just extend over here and then extend all of these lines on down as well. And by doing that, voila, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. Now, what I want to do, since it's 32 out of 100, what I'm going to want to do, I'll only do a little bit more thick because these squares are a lot smaller than these ones. What I'm going to want to do is well, I have 3 whole columns that are going to be 10, and then I'm going to have 2 extras. So let's make them a tiny bit thicker. I just want to be able to plop so this whole thing is going to be 10. And I'm going to go another column, and that's going to be 20. Because, as we know, each of these columns is going to be 10 long. Another column. of 10 log. Well, that's going to bring me to 30. Now that I'm at 30, I have 2 left, so 1, 2. That's going to be my model for 32%. Quite simple, right? It's exactly the same as what we did over here for 6%, except we just obviously had a much larger number to deal with. But the larger number didn't really make it any more difficult because we knew that each column was 10 long. Now, what if we were to go over here? Well, this one's going to start us off. Instead of starting us off with our percentage, it starts us off with our decimal. Well, I mean, we're starting off with our decimal. When we started off with our percentage, we had to move our decimal to the left 2. So maybe if I want to do the opposite, maybe I'm going to have to move my decimal to the right 2 times, which is going to give us 55%. Perfect. Well, now with 55%, it makes honestly everything a lot easier. 55%, well, that's going to be 55 over 100 as our fraction. Ooh, there's a bell. Then after 55 over 100, I can make that 55 to 100 because my whole is going to be 100. But, you know, I don't want to write another 100 grid. Drawing another 100 grid is going to take so long, and I don't have the energy in me anymore to do something like that. So what I want to do is I actually want to reduce this fraction in order to give me a fraction that might be a little bit, you know, better to make a grid out of, at least better than a 10 by 10 grid. So if I take my 55 and I divide it by 5, well, I can do the same to my 100. I can reduce this fraction and actually get 11 over 20. Now 11 over 20, it's not something out of 10, but it's at least easier and better to manage than a 10 by 10 grid. It's now going to be a 10 by 2 grid, which is slightly easier to manage. So I'm going to draw enough space for 2, and then I'm going to draw enough space for 10 for my rectangular grid. So first we go with our 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I just need to split it once right down the middle to make it a 10 by 2. See, a much easier grid to make than a 10 by 10. Just realized that I've been working on this one in purple as opposed to blue. It's fine, it doesn't matter. So now what we have to do is we need to shade in our squares. Well, seeing as we have 11 over 20, that means that at least one of these rows of 10 needs to be fully shaded in. So 1 whole, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So one entire row is shaded in, and then, well, I'm only left with 1. So boop, perfectly done. I'm going to go back to actually using blue this time. So we've finished off that grid. And now we can move on to this one. Oh, we have 9/10. Oh, well, for every other fraction that we had up here, the top number was just equal to my percent. So I guess it should be 9%. Well, you'd be wrong, person who said that, who totally isn't Mr. Heisey. Because if we remember correctly, it was only the top number when our bottom number was equal to 100. So if I want my denominator to be 100, I need to plop a 0 onto it, which means I'm going to have to plop a 0 onto the end of my 9, and that's going to give me 90. And now with that 90, I can go over here, swoop, 90%. 9/10, if I wanted to write that as a decimal, it's going to be 0.9. And then obviously with my percent, I can go that this is going to be 90 to 100, because remember, my whole is going to be 100 no matter what. My whole is going to be 100 because I'm dealing with percents, and percents are out of 100. So again, even though I could reduce this to 9 to 10, personally, we're just going to keep it as 90 to 100, just so that we can cement that similarity to percentages. Now, luckily, with 9/10 as our fraction, well, that makes our grid super easy. It's just going to be a 1/10. Which means I just need to draw 9 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now with my 9 lines, well, that means I got 10. And that means that I can start filling them in. How many do I have to fill in? Well, it's 9 out of 10. So that means I need to fill in 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And I can make sure that this was actually 10 because I should have 1 left, and lo and behold, I do. Now the last part of exercise 4, instead of giving us a decimal or a ratio or a fraction or the percentages that we've been working on, this time it gives us our model. Well, our model, if we look at it, well, it's out of 10 pieces, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them are shaded. So if I had to take that, well, the first and easiest way to do that is by turning it into a fraction, because we have 10 total, and we have 7 of them out of 10. You have 7 out of 10. But, again, to make this into something I can very super easily transform into a percentage, I need to multiply my top and my bottom by 10, and that's going to give me 70 out of 100. And 70 out of 100 is going to obviously be 70%. 7/10 is going to give me that 0.7, because that 7 is my 7/10. And then I can take my fraction or my percentage, slap it here, and set it to my whole, because it's a part to whole, so it's 70 to 100. And, oh, it feels so good, I didn't need to draw a model for this one. Drawing a model just takes so long sometimes. For exercise 5, we're going to be putting what we just did sort of to the test, and we're going to be just sort of slapping some things around and creating models and comparing fractions and decimals and all of that. So, for exercise 5, it says, Mr. Brown shares with the class that 70% of the students got an A on their English vocabulary quiz. Oh, that's perfect. Good job, the 70% of you that got an A. Applause. So if Mr. Brown has exactly 100 students, they're asking us to create a model to show how many of the students received an A on the quiz. A model again? Now, it might just want us to draw another 10 by 10 grid, but I'm not going to be fooled by them, because I know that a 70%, 70 out of 100, I can make a 1 by 10 grid instead. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if I have a grid of just 10, that means that for 70% I need to shade 7 out of the 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Well, it's then going to ask us, well, what fraction of the students received an A on the quiz? Oh, this is perfect. I've drawn my model, and it's so easy to get fractions from a model. Or, obviously, I also have my percent, and it's easy to get my fractions from the percentage. Well, I'm going to base it off of my model. So I have 7 out of the 10, or if I want to base it off of my percent, I can have 70 out of 100, 70 over 100. That's simple enough. We just spent a bunch of time. We even spent this exact last question that we had on what if we have a model of 7 out of 10. So we're perfectly prepared for this. We can even look at it when we talk about how could we represent this amount using a decimal. Well, we did that up here. That's going to be 0.7. It's going to be 0.7. So now the last question that it's asking us, well, how are the decimal, the fraction, and the percent all related? Now, I've said this phrase many times, again and again and again. The way that they're all related is because they all show They all show 70 out of 100. They all show 70 out of 100. Especially if we look at 70%, that percent literally means the words out of 100. So 70% is 70 out of 100. This fraction bar can be just replaced with the words out of. So, well, this first fraction says 7 out of 10. This second one says 70 out of 100. So all three of them are going to literally mean 70 out of 100. Exercise 6, I know that we said that we were going to go over it. I'm actually going to have us just skip over exercise 6. We don't really need to do it. Because exercise 6 is going to look very similar to what we had done over here in exercise 1, except instead of them giving you the percentages, you would just make up your own percentage. Like I could say employee 1 had 31%, and I could say employee 2 had 37%. And then I need to find out what employee 3 had. Well, employee 3 would have 32%, and then I'd make that into a fraction and a decimal, and I'd have to shade in the grid, but we'll just skid on past that and move on to the problem set. The problem set is actually not something for me to do. The problem set is actually going to be something for you all to do. For the first question of the problem set, it's actually going to be exactly like what we were about to do in exercise 6. You're going to pick the percentages of apple, peach, and cherry. You're going to find the fraction of them, the decimal of them, and then you're going to shade in each of them. The big thing to make sure of when you are dealing with percentages, your percentage needs to add. I'm not even going to write this out. It'll take me too long to write it out. It needs to add up to 100%. It needs to add up to 100%. I'll say this one more time. It needs to add up to 100%. It cannot go higher than 100%, because then you won't have enough squares for each of the different types of fruit. And it cannot be less than 100%, because then you're going to have some squares that are blank. So your percentage needs all three of them. When you add all three of them together, it needs to add up to 100%. That's the big thing. That's the one big thing. And question 2 says that after renovations, only 30% of one wall is left without any decor, and it's asking you to shade the grid. Well, question 2 is actually going to look very similar to another question we already did. It's going to look very similar to exercise 2, which we did earlier yesterday. So we shouldn't really have any problems with this problem set. If you are still struggling a little bit, be sure to send me a message off on Schoology. I will, obviously, as soon as I see it, get back to you. Hopefully we'll then be able to meet up during the asynchronous day that we have today and sort of get everything done, organized, and make sure that you can get it done. That being said, the problem set itself, as we've mentioned, is only going to be 2 questions long. So, in addition to this problem set, this isn't going to apply to all of you, because there are actually some of you who have absolutely everything turned in. However, there are some of us who do not have absolutely everything turned in. For those people who don't have everything turned in, I would honestly really appreciate it if you were to send me a message on Schoology asking for specifically what you're missing. The main thing is, if you look on Infinite Campus or on Schoology and your grade is not 100%, because I'm going to be spending the weekend grading those tests, if your grade is not 100%, that means you are missing an assignment. So, send me a message. I will gladly tell you what assignments you're missing, exactly what you need to do for those assignments, whether it's a problem set, whether it's an exercise in the middle of a lesson that you need to turn in. I will inform you exactly what it is you are missing so that you can get it done. Grades are closing not at the end of this week, but at the end of next week. So I won't be putting in any more new grades after then. I'll still have a little bit to grade any missing work, but just know that the marking period is ending next week. So if we're missing work, we really need to get it done, and we really need to get it in. Okay? So, well, I can send you a message, and I probably will send a message to some of you today about your missing work. But while I can send that message, it needs to be a two-way street. You need to also look at your grades, and you need to see, oh, I haven't turned this in, I haven't turned this in, or even just, I'm in the middle of something. Or even just look at your grades and say, I noticed that I don't have a 100%. Does that mean that I'm missing something? Well, for now, yes it does. Come Monday, might mean that you just did not get a 100 on the test. But if you see that your grade is not 100, you should be either asking yourself or asking me, what haven't you turned in? Again, with how technology is and how technology has been, I know that a lot of people have trouble submitting the assignments. I know that people have trouble seeing what assignments are even there. And there's even the possibility that some of you might not even know how to check your grade in the first place. If you don't know how to check your grade in the first place, let me know of that too, so that I can tell you, 1, what your grade is, and 2, what you're missing, if you're missing anything. So again, with that, your classwork / homework, it's technically classwork, is to finish up that problem set from the lesson that I kind of just went through with us. After you have finished that problem set, if you have any missing work, I would love for you to either message me or just get started on it if you actually know what you're missing. Those are the main 2 things that I need to get done from everyone. Again, some of us are done with all of our work, so problem set, you get to just relax until I see you again tomorrow. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see all of you tomorrow.